Good morning, and thank you for joining us in the Defining Sustainability in the Automotive Landscape session at CAR MBS 2020. This morning's session is sponsored by Eaton. During the session, all audience members will be muted to ensure a quality user experience for everyone participating. Please submit your questions by using the Q&A function. If you have any other questions regarding the virtual MBS experience, please feel free to ask those questions at the information desk in the virtual lobby. Please also take a moment to visit the virtual exhibits in the exhibit hall. And if you would like to earn CEU or PDH credits for participating in CAR MBS, please visit our MBS page on our website at www.cargroup.org to access the registration link for CEUs and PDHs. Once again, thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to welcome the session moderator, Business Unit Manager, Sustainability Consulting at NSF International, Josh Brueggemann.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning and to officially kick off this morning's car management briefing seminars, and also to kick off this morning's session, Defining Sustainability in the Automotive Landscape. Again, I'm Josh Brueggemann. I lead our sustainability consulting team at NSF International. We're an NGO that's focused on protecting human health and safety. And today, I'm joined by two incredible sustainability experts, Gulay Serhetkulu, a Senior Vice President at BASF, and Dane Parker, the Chief Sustainability Officer at General Motors. Sustainability has been an evolving and growing topic over the last decade, so I'm really excited for us to be able to talk about this. Some of you might be familiar with some of the early efforts, such as recycling programs and energy efficiency, but it's evolved so much. And while those efforts are really important, there's a lot more going on now. And efforts have evolved into things like very aggressive carbon reduction strategies that we're currently seeing from companies like Amazon and Microsoft. We're now seeing corporate goals that can stretch across entire value chains and have impacts on them. Products are getting completely redesigned with the circular economy in mind. And we're seeing a lot of pressure from investors too. Investors are requiring reporting on environmental and social performance. And also companies, I think, are starting to understand that their long-term viability is rooted in mitigating climate impacts. So the industry's gone from achieving returns on investment from simple energy efficiency measures a decade plus ago to now having corporate sustainability plans that include both environmental and social aspects as being a critical and central part of their go-to-market strategy. So we're hoping that from today's session, you walk away with a solid understanding of the sustainability efforts that are transpiring across the entire ecosystem that all of you participate in. We're hoping to have a fun conversation about all this. And I'm just honored to be here with Gulay and Dane with me today. As part of today's session, we're going to be taking questions throughout the session. So please feel free to submit your questions over the chat, and we will interject them into the conversation that Dane and Gulay and I are going to have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dane and Gulay and have them introduce themselves real quickly, and then we'll get into our conversation. And maybe Gulay, if you can go first.
Thank you very much, Josh. I wish I would be able to call myself a sustainability expert next to Dane. My name is Gulay Serhetkulu, and I work for BASF. I'm running one of the divisions in North America region, Performance Materials. I'm a chemical engineer by education, and I have master's, PhD, 2 postdocs, to complete my education all in the area of chemical engineering, materials science, and mainly polymers and plastics. I have been with BASF for the last 15 years. It will be 15 years in December of this year. Shortly about BASF, because it's a German-based company and some of our audience may not know. We are actually one of the world's leading chemical company with 59.3 billion of euro revenue in 2019, and with the earning of 8.4 billion euro. We have more than 117,000 people around the world, employees. We have 6 segments that we operate in, and they are chemicals, materials, industrial solutions, surface technologies, nutrition and care, and agricultural solutions. It's quite a wide portfolio. We have 6 Verbund integrated sites. We will talk about them in a minute, what it means, and 361 production sites in 90 different countries. 23% of our leadership positions belong to females. I'm one of them. We have 11,000 employees in research and development, and 2.2 billion euro of our sales comes from the products we recently developed. So just like you mentioned, like many big corporations and companies, we also have sustainability targets. And actually our statement is we create chemistry for sustainable future. That's our purpose statement for the people who are not very familiar with us. Thank you very much for having me here. And I think we will turn to Dane.
Thanks.
Thank you, Gulay. And, you know, I actually think Gulay represents the new generation of sustainability experts because what Gulay does is great products that are sustainable, and it's about products and not programs. And I'm really excited to be here with Gulay and to partner with BASF on this. So as Josh mentioned, I'm Dane Parker. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at General Motors. I also have day-to-day operational responsibility for all of our real estate, our facility design, engineering, construction, and operations, our environmental team, as well as our renewable energy and all of our energy management and procurement efforts. And so I've been fortunate to be involved in this area for a number of years, both here at General Motors and prior, and to see the changing and growing landscape of sustainability over the years. And you know, at General Motors, we're, as many of you are, in the midst of a very huge shift, maybe the largest shift in the last 100 years in our business. And it's a really exciting time to be a part of this because sustainability is a core part of this shift. And Josh, as you mentioned, it isn't about something in name that's temporary. It's really about the future, building a future that we can all thrive in, and enabling a planet and an environment as well as a place for people to thrive. And so at General Motors, we're excited to be a part of that. It's become really a core of where we're headed and what we're doing, and I'm excited to be here and talk about it today.
Well, thanks both for joining us today, and I'm excited that we're able to provide this, I think, diverse viewpoints and different perspectives of the industry for everyone to hear right now. So I want to get the elephant out in the room right now. We're obviously doing this conference virtually today. Unfortunately, we're not up in Traverse City. Life has changed as we know it for everyone involved right now, and I hope everyone is genuinely healthy and doing well. But I'd like to ask Dane, I'm going to start with you. How has, and I get this question from my clients all the time, how has the coronavirus changed how you're approaching sustainability? Has it sped things up, or has it slowed things down?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. It's one that I think is a common one to ask. And as we started this, I think there was some uncertainty in terms of what it might mean. And as we've progressed and moved forward, for us, what it's done really is I think helped sharpen the focus. For us, our vision and our goals are on track. And we set a couple of years ago a vision of a zero emissions future. And the products that we're building to enable that are absolutely on track. And we've continued throughout this challenging time to invest in those. And there hasn't been resistance from the company or the leadership or the board as we move forward. I think there's been a very common consensus on that this priority continues. And the investment has continued. And then I think as this coronavirus has heightened the awareness of things like the environment and clean air and water and supply chains and human health, I think the general population has become more aware of sustainability as a topic. And so if anything, I think it's raised the level of awareness, and our focus has continued, and in some cases even accelerated as we go through this.
Thanks. And so Gulay, for you and BASF, has it changed anything in terms of how you're doing business, how you're approaching your sustainability work right now?
I think that from the BASF standpoint, I think that if you think about sustainability in the planet, people, and profit, I think that we realize that we, with the COVID-19 crisis, that we start focusing on the most important asset for all of us, which are people. But I think in a crisis like that, when previously you kind of think unthinkable approaches becomes the new normal, just like right now that you start working, teleworking, virtual meetings, as you know. And we kind of learned that, for example, we can reduce travel and connect with our customers, even do conferences, as you see, via online platforms. And obviously there's a result and learning for all of us that I think that carbon dioxide emissions have dropped significantly during that time. And I think that's the largest ever recorded drop. Although with I have to say, coming with a large cost, but that we learned that. And at the same time, I think that we learn as a company that when most other companies, it's not only for BASF, I have to say, we promote health and wellness of our employees. That become I think that much more important. We connect with our customers on a different level. Some of our customers start producing products, for example, that's not their normal product line. We start working with them. And I also kind of that I have to say the relationship between not only with our customers, but government and other, I think that NGOs or certain groups that we normally do not work, like stakeholders, we change that as well. We produce, for example, hand sanitizers for the hospitals and around needed places. So that's, I think, that's important. You know, we also kind of see the weaknesses in our existing operations. Like we learn, for example, that supply chains can be long, especially in the automotive industry, how dependent we are in the supply chains. Those are the good things. But if you look at the North America region, I think that we also see that US Environmental Protection Agency, as you know, they temporarily relaxed the pollution enforcement to allow companies to focus on survival and with no end date for that. So and some in the, you know, I'm taking from my end, like in the past we use always single-use plastics, right? Now with the hygiene concept comes in, the thinking has defined that maybe single-use is not so bad, but we have to more focus on end-use solutions rather than the single use of plastics because of the hygiene concerns. And also, as you know, the education system is a little bit interrupted. So that will be, I think, for the next generation, a concern. So those are my learnings and what our company has been doing during COVID. It has been a learning experience for most of us, I have to say.
Yeah, I get that question from our clients a lot. And I'd say on the whole, I've seen companies kind of step up their efforts. And as you mentioned, Dane, sharpen their focus. And companies are doing different things. Some companies are more honed in on the environmental side. Some are more honed in on the social and all the racial injustice that we've seen recently. So all this now is being incorporated into sustainability efforts, and every company is taking their own path, but it seems to have amped things up, if anything. I want to shift a little bit to corporate commitments. We've seen in the past year, I know for myself, I've seen a level of corporate commitments publicly made that I kind of would have never imagined happening in my 18, 19 years of working in sustainability now. Commitments like being carbon neutral from Amazon, carbon negative commitments from Microsoft. There's a lot of them out there. And so, Dane, I wanted to ask you, what do you think is really driving these commitments, especially when we're seeing companies make commitments with no clear line of sight onto how they're going to achieve them? It's a bit of a moonshot goal where, we know we need to reduce carbon emissions for the health of the planet. We don't exactly know how that's going to be done, but what's the driving force? Why are companies being so bold? Because I know GM has a rather bold goal in this category as well.
Yeah, and I think there's a range of, and there certainly isn't maybe one answer to that question, Josh. I
Right.
think, a variety of things that have come together. But as I look at it from, companies like General Motors, who, when we look at our products and we realize, every company's footprint is different in terms of the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions and where those come from. And I think, what's driving, much of the commitment that you're seeing from companies is a combination of a shift in the perceptions and the desires of their key constituents. And if you look at some of the constituents, new employees, for example, or potential employees, the generation that's joining the workforce now in the last few years and the coming few years is much more attuned to sustainability. And whether it's the issues you talked about of racial justice or whether it's the environment, this is something that's meaningful to them. So I think companies realize that for employee engagement, for talent retention, they need to have a vision beyond. I think at the same time, investors and owners of companies are increasingly interested in the sustainability of those companies they own in terms of, are they going to be here in 5 years or 10 years? And are they doing the things today to thrive in the future? And so when you add, your employees with your investors and then customers and the awareness that customers have of some of their own choices and the impacts of their own decisions, which again, I think COVID has highlighted, if anything else, for better or for worse, we're all much more aware of our daily choices and actions. Do we drive or fly somewhere, or do we do a video conference? That might not have been on the top of mind before, and it is now. And so I think companies have seen all of that and realized that, they need to set visions further down the road. And some of them are moonshots. And like you said, things like maybe to set a bar high enough that the company will stretch. I think others have more pragmatic roadmaps to get there, and with General Motors, we did have this, we set a vision of a world with zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. That is a bit of a moonshot. And things like autonomous electric vehicles are going to be a really important part of that. And as we go forward, but right now, electric vehicles can be an important part of that. And so, we can build roadmaps within that moonshot that get us step by step by step and take us there. And so I think you're going to see increasingly, it'll be the exception for companies to not have goals because it's going to be expected. I think all of our constituents are going to want that. And I think it's inspiring to work there. I wasn't a part of the Apollo program that we use this language from, but in reading books about that and watching things about it, the excitement and the energy and the passion that 15-year effort unleashed was amazing. And so if we can do that with these bold goals, we'll look back on this time period with that same amount of pride that, others look back on that time period.
Yeah, thinking about corporate commitments and how those transcend across the ecosystem, especially for everyone who's online today, I think it's really important to understand that a corporate commitment like GM's zero goals, that I'm assuming, Dane, you would agree that transcends across your entire supply base. And so it's interesting to think about how you have your consumers that are purchasing the vehicles. They have their own needs. You mentioned employee attraction and retention. There's a very established body of research now on that. And then there's Wall Street in the finance industry. And I was wondering if either of you wants to touch on maybe your experience internally, either at BASF or General Motors, on how that part of the industry is starting to become much more sophisticated in looking at environmental performance and making a lot more requests. So I'll open that up to either of you.
How about I start and then Gulai can jump in?
Okay.
I've spent a lot of time in the last several months with investors, and it's interesting. When I first got involved in these topics maybe 20 years ago, they were more specialty or niche investors that were interested in asking questions. In the last 3 or 4 months, I've talked to virtually every large investor, the largest in the world, and those that are, we mainstream investors. And when you look at the data, the flows of money into more sustainability focused exchange traded funds and mutual funds is growing incredibly rapidly. And I think was $2 trillion in the last calendar year. And so that momentum has been really, really impressive to see. And I think more and more mainstream investors view this as mainstream, and therefore they're interested in what the company is doing in a very different way than perhaps they were 10 years ago. So that's certainly what I've seen. Gulai, what have you experienced?
Yeah, the same thing. I think if you even I think follow the news, right? I think it was late in 2018 when in the Financial Times that we read an article about one of the the CEO of the Larry Fink, I guess, that says of BlackRock, by the way. They are the largest asset manager in the world. They said that sustainable investing will be a core component of how everyone invests in the future. And then not only BlackRock, but then we have Citigroup doing the same thing. And then they ask for their, let's say, companies that they hold their the shares act sustainable. Well, because also there's a study, it's not only, I think, for the good corporate citizenship, there's also a study that when companies have future and sustainable programs, that the returns will be higher. So they're also in it for the money. Let's be honest here, right? And for us, it's a win-win situation because we want to, sustainability, we always say that has three parts, and profit is one of them. So without profit, then we can't be establish a sustainable program. I think that one part of it, what I see is when you have sustainability programs, you also do quite a good risk management for what you expect in the future. It's, I think that it's becoming part of your business strategy, and you kind of become more, I think, aware of reducing your exposures and the safety in the natural hazards and everything. So it's when you look at the scope of what sustainability covers, that makes quite a bit sense. And I can understand why this is going into this direction, that they request some sustainability measures, because it's not only about the environment, it's about the sustainable profit, it's about sustainability, about the talent, as Dane rightfully point out. So I see the same thing. There's, I think, the profit in it, and also there is the win-win situation for everybody and for the planet.
Yeah, the Larry Fink letter, there's been a few Larry Fink letters, and the one that came out this year was, I think, substantial for the industry. His entire letter to investors was solely focused on sustainability, just so everybody knows, and stated that they will be making investment decisions based on sustainability performance. They will be making voting decisions at boards, and they will be requiring all of the companies that they're invested in to report out to certain sustainability reporting frameworks. That was a sea change for the industry, and so everyone's following suit. But the industry as a whole has been moving from a point, as Dane said, where it's been a little more niche to trying to get some institutionalized mechanisms in place. So, when you go to look at investing in a mutual fund, you can compare your Morningstar rating, and we're just kind of now getting to a point where you start to have that apples to apples comparison, and there is data. I can't remember if it's Procter & Gamble or Unilever, but they have data showing that their sustainable brands are outperforming their conventional brands, and so there's a track record now that's leading to higher returns for investors, and investors are also, I think, realizing the long-term risk at play with climate impact. Gulai, I want to go back to your corporate commitments. I know you have a lot of corporate commitments behind responsible sourcing, and so I just think it's really important for all of us to understand some of the different drivers that exist for different types of commitments, and I want to ask you about what's driving BASF's commitment to responsible sourcing and how that's impacting your kind of go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, so we have, like many companies, have financial targets and non-financial targets. And one of the non-financial targets is related to procurement, as you mentioned. So we would like to cover sustainability evaluations of 90% or of our spend by 2025. So working with our, let's say, partners, and we expect them to act also responsible. So what we do is we work with our suppliers in an open and transparent way to realize mutual long-term benefits. And when we look at the new suppliers or existing suppliers, we evaluate their platforms on the sustainable end. But we also look at the environmental, social, and corporate governance topics with them. Why it's important? Because if you look at the things that we are dealing in the world, that the human rights, labor, environmental concerns, anti-corruption, child labor, I mean, these are bigger than one company alone to handle. And I think the groups and the people on the value chain, working in the value chain, needs to collaborate together to make sure we actually work with the right partners. And I think that many companies are thinking in the same way. So we want our partners or the companies that we buy products and make business with, being part of that are, let's say, responsible actions as well. And I think that I believe why it's important that you ask, because sometimes I think that if you think the scale of the problems, all stakeholders must unite, in my opinion, to transfer this aspiration of for a better world to become to a reality. And when we evaluate our suppliers, we also work with them in the programs that how to, let's say, improve certain areas of their either environmental or corporate governance topics, and work with them together to, let's say, improve their also sustainability measures. So that's one of our, let's say, non-financial targets.
Great. Thanks so much. Yeah, so it seems like responsible sourcing really incorporates a few different aspects and is going to require you to be working with a lot of your industry partners.
Correct. Yeah.
I want to obviously another big part of sustainability for the industry here and for both of you are your products. So much of the embedded sustainability aspects are in your products. We can talk about your manufacturing plant, your operations, your logistics, but the products are paramount. So Dane, in your recently published General Motors sustainability report that's pretty hot off the press, there's a mention in there that 50% of General Motors parts are to be sustainable. So I was wondering if you can talk about that a little bit and what that means. And then it looks like we might have a follow-up question from an audience member on this topic as well.
Sure. So, so as you mentioned, in fact, let me tie this into one of the Q&As I saw as a question on life cycle analysis, and will life cycle.
That's exactly a question I was going for. So go ahead.
Will that become something that might be legislated? And just from a tongue-in-cheek perspective, I don't think it'll be legislated because I think it's something that legislators may not fully understand. It's a more complex in some ways. But the spirit of that, I think, will become a much more normal way of looking at business. And so when we step back and do a life cycle analysis on our products, and what we clearly see is that the quote tailpipe emissions and the content of the vehicle are 95% of the life cycle emissions. And so while we've been doing a great job with our own operations and energy efficiency, the things you mentioned, the 95% is product related, and therefore we need to have goals and targets around that. And so when we break that out, for us, the big chunk relates to vehicle emissions. And that's why electric vehicles are so important to our future. But then that shifts the burden to product content and material content and all the things that Gulay talked about in terms of our partners and our supply base. And so we set this target of having a 50% sustainable content by 2030. because we realize that that's how we're going to really move the needle together in this, is look at the actual content of the product and how can we innovate around that, and how can we use the technology that's here or that's coming, and to make better use of materials that we have, whether they're metals or plastics, reuse materials. You know, this, I think the industry in general, one of the things that we don't get credit for is the amount of recycling that happens at the end of our product's life cycle. So by mass, vehicles are 85 or percent higher recyclable. And in fact, that happens. It's been happening for a while. So one part of sort of that circularity is enabled. We need to enable the front end of that. And so if we can turn more of that back into the supply chain, and bend that back around to use and create more sustainable content as we start, we have the chance to do, you know, make a major step towards circularity. And so it is something, as you mentioned, as Gulay mentioned, that it has to be a partnership, and you do have to look at the life cycle analysis for those things and what are the trade-offs when you bend things back into your supply chain, and the trade-offs both in terms of environmental impact, in terms of cost, reliability, quality, all those things. But there's huge opportunities for innovation here. And one last point I'll mention on this is to the other question, you know, what are all parts of the business that might look similar? Let's say that someone mentioned foundries. You know, even something that might look similar, you can still look at doing it differently. You know, what's the energy you use to power the foundry? And what is the amount of scrap that you reuse in that? What's the waste that you generate? Are you using, again, post-industrial content to start the process in the foundry? Then as you go forward, what about additive manufacturing, where you don't have waste and where you can do things you couldn't do before? So I think technology is going to enable changes even in something like a foundry that may not have changed in the last 100 years. We're going to see some exciting changes in going forward.
So what does a sustainable product mean? Like what's the definition of that? Is that it has recycled content as part of it, that it has less virgin content? Is there a definition around that, or is that one of those items that is still getting defined?
I think some of that also, it depends on who you ask, you'll get a different answer. I think you've mentioned several yeses, because there is the obvious answer of, let's say, post-consumer or post-industrial, so that, you know, the content has having a second or a third or a fourth life. Clearly that's, in most cases, that's much more sustainable. But there are also other sustainable things that are responsibly sourced or bio type materials that can be also very sustainable, so that what you're doing in the net doesn't take away from the planet's resources to sustain itself going forward. And so I think we want to leave room for both, for other multiple kinds of solutions that truly are sustainable, and doing things like a life cycle analysis helps you see that, where there are obvious answers, but there are other answers to things that are also sustainable that we'll need in the future to get where we need to go.
Thanks. So Dane, GM has this big commitment to 50% of the products are going to have some type of sustainability attribute, essentially. And Gulay, BASF also has a rather ambitious effort underway for the production of your products. And your products are obviously feeding into, I would imagine, helping Dane achieve some of his goals. So what is changing internally? I mean, that's a massive undertaking for you to go from where you were to meet your goals. So I was wondering if you can explain what you're doing internally to ramp up efforts, because I think this is a really important point of all suppliers are going to be probably going through a similar effort. And I don't mean it as a scare tactic, but it's going to take everyone rallying around this to help folks meet their goals. So, and then I want to get to, there's some great questions coming in here. So I want to have you answer that, and then we're going to switch it over.
I think that I will not take it as a scary point. I will take it as a challenge accepted. And also that kind of addressed the very beginning, at the very beginning of the opening, that you mentioned that we have all these targets, but we don't necessarily have how to go there. I think that kind of answers, actually we do, right? We are working on the things. And one of the things that we are working on, just because we have customers like GM, have substantial sustainability targets, we invest in I will say, a program that to provide our customers total value of the carbon dioxide emissions or the carbon footprints of all our products. The product carbon footprint, it means that, you know, when you're producing a product, greenhouse gas emissions happen during the production till it leaves the BASF gate. And so it includes the purchase raw materials, the production step, and then till it goes to the customer. And in the course of 2021, next year, we will be able to provide the carbon footprints of 45,000 BASF products to our customers. So that will help creating this transparency for the carbon footprint for our customers. So then, for example, then Dane can make the choice that, you know, A product or P product to be able to meet his own targets while designing products or making new programs. We are also working on really creating a global standard to be able to do that, to give this information to our customers. One of the things that I can say that why this is so unique, most of us sometimes, and I think there was a question, will there be a legislation, will there be a regulation? If we start waiting for regulations, or if we start continue waiting for some government to make a legislation around it, or take action towards that, then I think it will be quite a bit of late for taking the actions or meeting our sustainability targets for BASF, and I also know for our customers like GM and for all of our customers. So I think that we kind of take it into our hands, obviously working with groups and standards to meet certain standards to be able to do that, that has, you know, scientific data behind and acceptable by third parties. But yes, we take that as an action. So why is it important? Not only from the customer demand, but also we have to, you know, when you have a target, you have to also have the measure and the data to be able to measure what you're doing, right? That's why this is important step for us to meet our sustainability targets, non-financial targets, of increasing our sales of sustainable products that has contributions to the value chain from the sustainability standpoint significantly, and also growing carbon dioxide neutral. So for both targets, for BASF and for our customers, just like GM, as Dane mentioned, that they have the also 50% commitment of their products being sustainable footprint, that will help them also having this data and use it in their platform to make their target or let's say ambitions happen.
45,000 products.
Correct.
That's a big shift. And,
yes, and that's by the way, yeah, that requires quite a bit of investment. Sometimes when we talk about innovation, we only think about the new product coming into market or new process of creating a new chemistry. But creating data, creating standards is also an innovation. It's also an investment in what you're trying to do. And this is one of those, right? And I think that people underestimate the amount of work that goes into just creating that data, being able to generate that data for our customers. So,
and this is something that's going on across multiple industries right now, where companies that have massive portfolios of products are trying to wrap their heads around creating a standard and working across their whole portfolio. So you mentioned investment. There was a question that came in from Jared, and I appreciate all the great questions coming in. I see some of them are coming in via the chat as well. So Jared asked a question, Gulay and Dane, about profitability, that essentially a sustainability program might fly in the face of profitability. And so how do you take that into account in setting your sustainability goals? So I think it'd be great if one of you could respond to this in terms of how you approach that. Is this truly a cost, or does it present opportunity for the company overall?
So let me understand the question. How profitability comes into place is the question?
No, I think the question is that a sustainability program as a whole is a huge cost, right? You have to make investments in infrastructure, you have to make investments in program, there's the cost of staff, and so some view that as an overall cost. And I think we also see companies seeing it as critical means of doing business moving forward to help avoid risk. And so are you viewing, are you seeing the cost being outweighed by the opportunity moving forward?
I can give it a try, and then Dane maybe add some additional points from his standpoint. I think that, look, how it happens is you look at macroeconomics usually, what happens in the outside world, and then that becomes a company strategy, and then you kind of make your decisions, investments based on that. Let's look at the macroeconomics. We know the world population is going to reach to 9.7 billion by 2050, and then there will be living standards increasing, and consumption of I think the resource intensive goods is going to be increasing. And then we have the food, water, energy issue. And even today, we will be actually consuming 75% more natural resources than we actually generate, right? So there's I will say challenge and an opportunity for companies to that how to take that macroeconomical forecast to their strategies. And then there's the second part I think that they mentioned, and we didn't maybe always pay attention, is the generation topic, that the new generation, like I have a 17-year-old kid that I can tell you that yes, his thinking, the value system, the psychology of ownership that he has is quite different. And these people, just like my son, is going to be in the workforce, will be our customer, or making strategies for the companies, or making buying decisions for the companies. So when you put all of these challenges and picture together, you have to understand that what will make money in the future. If you're short-term thinking, yes, profit, maybe it may not make sense. But if you want to really survive in the future, and I can tell you, BASF does it very well because we are here more than 150 years, then you have to take into account that what will work for tomorrow, and you have to do your investment decisions accordingly. I'm not saying only take the picture of sustainability or the planet, but there's the people aspect and there's the profit aspect. And when you make the decisions for sustainable future, you have to look into 3 areas. And yes, there will be areas that it will make sense, and there will be areas that it will not make sense, and you're not going to go for those. But profit thinking is only when you are not thinking the macro trends and what will happen to world tomorrow, but only in the short term. So if you want to do long term, then you have to put into picture all these different elements.
Thanks, Gulay. I know we only have a few minutes left here. There's so many great questions coming in. I wish we could answer all of them and spend more time. I just saw a question come in from John McElroy, and I wanted to ask it to you, Dane. John says that while companies publish sustainability reports, do you see a future where companies would include sustainability data in financial reporting? So it's an interesting thought, especially as we're in a pretty dynamic and evolving environment right now.
Ultimately, I think the simple answer is yes. Those 2 work streams will come together. And Josh, I don't know if we can. I'm happy to stay and answer some of the Q&As in a chat mode after, if the forum allows for that. Okay. I can stay with things. But in simple terms, I think the answer is yes. Sustainability reports today are a combination of data and storage. And, they've evolved to where they're often larger than most constituents that want the data, want to read, and the stories might be not to all the right audience. And so I think what I see evolving is that data will be data, and increasingly sustainability data will be financial performance tied, and perhaps even released at the same time, concurrent with, or in like manner as financial data. And then the stories and the emotions and the feelings around sustainability will be shared on an ongoing basis, just the way companies talk about who they are, what they stand for, and where they're going on an ongoing basis. So I think we'll see that trend, and it needs to get simpler. There are too many standards right now, and it's expensive and complex to report in 23 different standards. But I think we'll see something merging, and we'll see data being reported consistently as data.
Thanks. There was another question that came in for you, Dane. What is the priority for GM in reaching your goals? Do you have certain operations? Do you have certain products? I'm assuming it's all of the above, right?
Yeah, it is all of the above. We do start though with a prioritization based on the data, and so for us, and energy is huge, and there's some questions on energy. Renewable energy and the transition to renewable energy is very important to us. And to one of the comments, in some places it is more expensive, in many places it's less expensive, and trending that way as it continues to scale. So energy for us and for many of our suppliers is the biggest area of focus, for example, in terms of reduction. And then material content, and and the materials that we use are probably a very close second to that. And so that's where companies like BASF are so important to us in the work they're doing. But I think those two things for us, energy and then materials, are very important. Of course, the batteries and the work we're doing with batteries. Someone asked about second life for batteries, and the answer is absolutely yes. We're planning and engineering batteries to be upgradable and to have certainly more than one life, and for the content in those to also be reusable in its core form if it needs to be. And I think that's going to be really important for the future of electric vehicles.
Excellent. Well, unfortunately, we're at the end of time. I'm being told that we need to conclude the session. Thank you for all the great questions that come in. If there's some way that we can figure out how to get back to you on a few of these, we will. But I know everyone has another session to go to. Again, thanks for participating in the first sustainability session that's part of the management briefing seminars. We're hoping to do hopefully more of these, and just really want to thank Gulai and Dane for participating. It was a great conversation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Josh and Gulai.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Same. Thank you for the great questions and joining us.